Hello, everybody, and welcome to Compliance Conversations. I'm so glad that you could join us today for this exciting conversation. I'm thrilled to be discussing AML risk in a time of disruption and to have my esteemed guest with me this day, Yemi Oyeleye. I always get a bit tongue-tied. Apologies.
No problem.
He
Thank you,
is the
Kudzai.
head of compliance risk management, responsible for correspondent banking, due diligence, and reporting for a financial institution in Nigeria, a commercial bank. And he has an extensive background within financial services and in the anti-financial crime space, with skills across transaction monitoring, KYC, sanctions, you name it. He has the skill set. So the perfect person for me to be having this conversation with. So thank you so much, Yemi, for being my guest today, and welcome to Compliance Conversations.
Thank you very much, Kudzai. It's my pleasure to be here.
No, I'm so grateful to have you here. And, without much ado, let's just jump straight in, because I've got so much to ask you. And I know there's people who are going to join the conversation as well, who potentially will have questions. So, let's just dive straight into the conversation. So I've already mentioned that you have you're a seasoned compliance professional, specializing in the anti-financial crime space. What was it that drew you to that specialization and made you decide that this is the career path that you want to take?
Okay. For me, I actually had some experience in technology because I came from a technology background.
Okay.
I've done some jobs in that area. But then, after some years, I just felt that it's time for me to actually carry out a career assessment. Let me even be sure where my strength lies and what I could do excellently. And one of the things that stood out for me is administration. I discovered that I could lead well, I could organize well, and those are some of the things I can do excellently. And then also for me to also look at what I've done in the past, I realized that even when I was young, even as a young boy, that I actually enjoy to arrange things. I could remember that even when my parents, they leave the home to do a few things outside, before they come back, I will have arranged the sitting room. I was like, you could imagine.
You're an organizer from birth.
Yes.
I can relate.
So that's one of the things I just felt that is actually my area of strength. And after carrying out the career assessment, I discovered that I think I should pursue things in this area. So good enough, after doing that test, I started I now look at what I could do. I look at financial crime, compliance, things like that. I realized that these are the areas I can actually focus on. So eventually I got a job in a financial institution. Then my initial plan was actually to work as an IS control officer, but I couldn't get that. Eventually I was moved to compliance. But the good thing for me is that even as a compliance officer, I discovered that these are the things that I'm passionate about. A few things. I realized that I'm passionate about people getting things done rightly. And there's certain things I couldn't even just stand. When people do things crookedly, I couldn't stand it. So I realized that compliance is actually one area where I would excel.
Yeah.
And then for me, the compliance affords me the opportunity of doing three major things. I could learn. In compliance, the opportunities for you to learn on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Every day there are new things coming up. So for me, I could learn. Another thing is that I could create things. Once you develop policies, you look at controls, you improve on the controls. These are some of the things I really enjoy. And then I also could lead. So I found that as a financial crime person, I could do all these things. And much more than that, I realized that I'm also serving my nation. I could protect our customers, and I can also protect my nation. Because that's there are two things that I also enjoy doing. That's leadership. Leadership and national, these are things I'm passionate about, leadership and national development. And I discovered that even as a compliance person, I could do those two things. My job affords me the opportunity of doing it excellently because I can protect my nation from the activities of money launderers, terrorist financiers, proliferation financiers, and so on and so forth. I could protect my nation. I could protect our customers. You understand? And not only that, I could also lead my team. Because one of the things that also give me joy is that every day I like to add value to people. And I realize that as a financial crime person, I could add value to our customers. I could add value to my team members. I could add value to other stakeholders. And beyond that, you understand, as a compliance person, you are not only doing, when you are seeing, as you are seeing, you can act because you can act on it. You know, there are a lot of operations where your own job is just to report. Maybe like a journalist, you only report. But as a financial crime person, when you see something, you say something and you do something. That's
Yes.
one thing that I enjoy as in compliance as a financial crime compliance person. You could see, you could say, and you can act. So that's
Absolutely.
just it. So for me, when you look at financial crime compliance, it's just things I can do excellently. You understand?
Yeah.
It's something that I enjoy doing, and it's something that I feel that I can add value to people through it. Thank you.
I mean, what I really love about your answer, well, I love everything about your answer, but the things that really stick out for me was first the fact that you said you came from a technology background and then you went into financial services hoping to be in a kind of technology related space and you found yourself in compliance and you have since excelled and realized that it actually is very well suited for your personal skill set and preferences that you have in terms of how you operate. And the great thing about that is that I constantly get this question around how do I get into compliance? Do I need a law degree? What and XYZ? And I always love it when I have conversations with people that shine a light on a completely different and unexpected pathway into compliance. Like you said, you were started in technology, but here you are in compliance, heading up compliance for a commercial bank with that background. And you navigated your way. So I really like, when that an example is brought forward that people can look to and realize that actually there is no one way to be in compliance or to get into a career in compliance. There's many disciplines that you can still be from, not necessarily legal or audit or whatever, even operations, whatever the case may be, but, and still have a successful career in compliance. So I really love that. And then, the skill set that you also described around, leadership, administration, and how all of those come together to allow you to do your work excellently. Because, like you said, and I say this all the time, compliance is such a multifaceted career. You learn every day as long as you are. And it's, for me, that's why you can never be bored if you're in compliance. If you're in compliance and you're bored, it's like, maybe there's something you're not doing right there because you can't be a board compliance officer. So
It's not possible.
It's not possible. Challenged, stressed maybe, but bored definitely not. So, I really liked your answer because it touched on all of those answers. But then, like you're a financial crime expert and that's your specialization and you love the space. But, all things being said right now, that space, along with, I guess, a lot of spaces is being challenged because of the environment that we're in. It's disruption after disruption. We've had a global pandemic for the last couple of years that we all thought was going to be 21 days. And now we're 3 years in, and we still don't know when it's going to end.
3 years down the line.
3 years down the line, we're still dealing with it. You've got a world war that's threatening.
Yeah.
Nobody's quite sure what's going to happen with that, and all the implications that are starting to emerge from that. And then you've got digitization and technological innovation that is
Yeah.
happening at warp speed. So there's all this stuff that is affecting what used to be our very comfortable norm. I think the only disruptive thing that happened, in my memory, was the financial crisis of 2008, right? And the ripple effect of that. And then,
Yeah.
but everything was pretty much stable, and we all still felt like, okay, normal kind of thing. But now this is like upside down, inside out. The world is just looking very different from what anyone recognizes. So I guess my question for you is, like, when you look at your world now, financial crime, AML, it's like all of those things, how have they been impacted by all of this disruption that's taking place? And what sort of new risks are you seeing emerge as a result of everything that's been going on?
It's quite tough now because, if you look at what has happened in the last 2.5 years, things that we never imagined could happen. Look, take for example my country, Nigeria. You find a situation where you could never imagine that we can work from home, or telework, or remote work. Nobody believed in it, because we are averse to such changes. My the natural thing for people is to come to work. You must be present. Your supervisor want to see you face to face.
With you. They must
But
lay
now,
eyes on you.
but now you find a lot of us working from home 2 years. You understand? 2 or more years. You have people who have been working from home. And that's one of the challenges we are having now in this present in this present world of COVID, or the pandemic. And not only that, some of the issues we're also having is the digitization. Because of the need for people to work from home, you understand, and then for financial institutions to still offer those services, there's been urgent need for financial institutions to digitize their services. So digitization has been a major challenge to a financial institution. And this has impacted AML safety, financial crime risk. What are you talking? It has impacted it largely, because you now find a situation where even the products you're offering to customers, they are digitized. Your customers, you don't want them to come to the branch because even of the government restrictions, because of restrictions of COVID. You prefer them to work to log in from home. So these are some of the things that has affected the financial crime space, and the risk has changed drastically. Before, pre-pandemic, you find a situation where, especially in my country, they kept on opening branches. But I can't remember the last time you have banks of financial institutions in my country open new branches. They're even closing down branches. In the last report, the last regulatory report I saw by CBN, that's the Central Bank of Nigeria, that's the industry regulator. A lot of banks they've closed a lot of branches, and they keep on closing the branches because now is the era of digitization. But then this digitization has introduced a lot of risk. You now find a situation where the customers you're onboarding, you're not even seeing the customer physically. The customer is going to be onboarded virtually. So how do you, as a financial crime person, how do you manage or mitigate this risk? If you look at the transactions that are taking place now, the transactions online are more than the one that is being done at the branches. So those are some of the challenges you face. So what do you do as a financial crime person? The risk has changed. The strategies you used pre-pandemic, you can't use the same strategies post-pandemic. It's not possible. Because I've had cases of people that have not even gone to the bank in 2 years. They've not been to the bank in 2 years. So how do you manage the risk of those customers? And they're carrying out transactions. So for you as a financial crime person, these are some of the challenges that you are faced with. So then what do you do? And now talk about even the current issue we're having in what's it called in Russia, Ukraine. Those are the sanctions risk. So those are some of the issues we are facing in in financial crime now. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so much is happening and so much is different, right? To your point around the branch network, where you could say to a customer, come into branch to collect your card or to submit a copy of your ID or proof of residence, for example. And now during a pandemic, that would be something that you're like, okay, we need a digital solution for that. And if you didn't have it before, now you're in a rush to implement that. And then there's all sorts of challenges that can also come with implementing those systems, because, it's not like you just pick up a piece of paper, pick up a disk and plug it in and it starts working. We've got legacy systems that we have to deal with and find out how are they interacting with these new technologies. Is there new risks being introduced by this new technology? Some people are using artificial intelligence to now do customer identification and risk assessments and all of that. How reliable is it? What happens if that decides to crash? So there's all sorts of new conversations that we're going to have to be responding to in terms of, okay, how do we assess these new risks that are being brought about by digitization? And then, you also mentioned around customer identification and also some of the methodologies that we're
It's a
using
major
as
issue.
compliance. So for me, I've always been thinking about like monitoring and testing, for example, that we do in compliance. That's something that we used to physically go into spaces. Yes, you can request documents, but you'd also physically go into spaces and look at processes, look at how they're operating, have conversations with people. And now things like our own methodologies as compliance are going to have to be more responsive to the new ways of doing things, and all those methodologies really
Certainly.
adapting and moving with the times fast enough, because my view is that things are changing so fast. Look at cryptocurrency, look at the metaverse. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the metaverse, and I'm just like, what is this thing? But people are out there and creating new worlds, essentially, when you look at the metaverse. And how are we, if our business is saying, I want to go into the metaverse and establish a presence there, how are we risk assessing that? How are we monitoring that space for transactions and stuff like that? So that's why I find the space of financial crime, particularly right now, really interesting, because that's probably the larger risk and cybersecurity and all that, the larger of the risks that you see within this digitization space. So it's very interesting, I'm sure.
It is, certainly.
So what sort of key risk indicators do you think, a financial crime compliance officer who's operating in this space and similar to me is trying to wrap their head around, okay, metaverse, whatever. What are the key risk indicators that you think they should be looking at and considering when dealing with these disruptions?
Okay. When you talk about the key risk indicators, for a financial crime professional, the person must be looking at the customer type. That's one of the things you should focus on. For example, look at the kind of customers your financial institution is onboarding. You must be well versed about the type of customers. And then you must be able to put in controls. Look at the controls. What are the inherent risks of these customers? What are the controls you're going to put in place when you bring in this kind of customers? Begin to look at the residual risk. You understand? And then when you look at the residual risk, what other things do you think can still be done? But then you cannot do this alone as a compliance person. You have to engage other stakeholders. You can't just sit down in your office as a compliance person and then coming up with controls. You have to engage the business-facing teams. You have to engage them and sit down with them in a workshop or a meeting or whatever, getting to know about all these things. Ensure at least those customers, you must try and dimension those customers. Very important. That's one of the things you should focus on at this particular period. Beyond the customers, we also have your products. Rather than products, our products keep on changing, has changed now. You now find a situation where you have a lot of digital products. You have a situation where customers are being encouraged even to use online banking. So those are some of the things you should watch out for. Online, when new customers are using online banking, what mitigants are in place? What controls are in place? Are they well trained? Are you sensitizing them about the risk of that channel? Because you will not be doing well as a compliance person if you don't let the consumers talk to your other business teams, and then maybe your brand and communication team carry them along and let them know that come. These are things that you need to sensitize the customers about. That come, your online banking is just like a bank. Your profile, your password, and your token must be securely kept. And those are some of the things you should be thinking about as a financial crime professional. Make sure that all those controls are in place, and then you want to be reviewing them. And beyond that, we also be watchful of the geographical risk. You know, nowadays, you have a situation where your customers that you're onboarding, some of them are actually outside your location, some of them are overseas. So, and you know that when the customer is overseas or not resident in your country, there are also some element of risk there. The risk is heightened. So, how do you determine that these customers? Do you have a way of determining the customers that are diaspora customers? Does your system have a way of identifying them? Does your system have these are some of the things you have to put in place. You must have a way of ensuring that your system can identify customers that are diaspora. Because some of them will not even tell you they are diaspora customers. You have to find a way of identifying it. If your customer is doing, your system must be able to track your customers in such a way that if they are doing transactions outside your country, you should be able to know that, okay, if this customer for 2 months, 3 months is doing transaction outside the country, your monitoring system should be able to alert you and tell you that this customer is most likely not domiciled in your country. It's a non-resident customer. So those are some of the things that your system now must identify. Because you know when you look at geographic risk, basically, you must be sure of, okay, are you sure you want to, even the people that you are onboarding, for example, do you want to onboard people from high-risk regions or sanctioned countries? Those are some of the things you have to be watchful. So even if they are signing on your onboarding platform, is there a way you can verify where they are signing on from? And is there a way, is your institution have the appetite to onboard to onboard entities and individuals from high-risk countries, sanctioned countries? Those are some of the things you must be watchful of. And beyond that, again, as a financial crime person, you must be mindful of the bribery and corruption risk. And now, that's what the risk also focus on. You focus on the sanctions risk. You can see now that the number of, I was looking at the statistics, the number of sanctions that has been imposed on Russia in the last 3 weeks is more than the all sanctions that were imposed on Syria, imposed on Libya, imposed on Iran. If you add the sanctions on Russia, so you have to be sure that, okay, your customers, you have to be sure of the risk they are bringing to your institution, even as a financial crime person. And there are several other things you have to monitor. What about data security? It's one risk too. You must be monitoring as a financial crime person. Yeah. Data security. What if there's a data breach? What happens? And several other things, that you have to monitor as a financial crime person.
Yeah, and I think you're all very valid points. And you mentioned the system has to be able to identify, which I guess rolls back to the conversation we're having a little bit earlier around technology. Yeah. That today sanctions are announced against Russia and against these 20 million oligarchs or whatever, right? You need to be able to have a system that supports you in being able to to identify those people, flag them, raise them, and do the necessary work so that you as a bank don't find yourselves in a position where you facilitated transactions because either your transactions monitoring or your screening
Transaction
processes,
screening, yeah.
transaction screening wasn't up to scratch. So it's really, it's not. I think it's very important now more than ever, given everything that's happening, to have systems that support the diligence of what it is that you're trying to do or need to do, and also then to be like, okay, you have the necessary skills within your team to be able to, when the system throws out these exception reports and transaction monitoring reports, to then be able to assess them. Because this is where I always say, because I think compliance officers, even in the technological era, will always have a job. AI and all of that can do certain things, they can pop them up, but that human assessment, I think, is still going to be very important.
Very
War
important.
against financial crime, to be able to really make that value judgment. Like you're saying, it's about, okay, these transactions are flowing from Ukraine or Russia or Syria, but this person is registered as a resident. There's certain value judgments that only a human being can make. So in that respect, I think like our jobs are secure. But yeah, I think there needs to be a balance of technological implementation as well as human intervention, to make sure that we're actually able to cope with all the disruption and the demands that are coming upon us as compliance. You still have to do transaction monitoring, but there's a global pandemic and you can't go to the office. How do you balance it out? So it's all of that kind of has to work together. I've got a question here that I'm going to just jump to quickly before we continue with our discussion. It's from Karabo Maelane, and she says, what is the Financial Intelligence Center Act, that's the South African Anti-Money Laundering Act, equivalent in Nigeria or other Western African countries? So what's your AML legislation in Nigeria?
Money Laundering Prohibition Act.
Money Laundering
Prohibition Act.
Okay.
2013 as amended.
Okay, there we go. There's the answer to your question. And then she also comments valuable points made. So, my apologies. He also comments valuable points made. I know someone called Karabo and she's a female, so I just went naturally to that. So apologies.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So that was that question. Okay, so in terms of, we've talked about the what is emerging as a result of risk management in AML and the disruption that's happening in the world. But in terms of risk management itself and the methodologies that we are having to employ and apply, you hear of reg tech, super tech, and all these different things that are taking place. Have you seen anything in terms of the evolution of what we are doing? Do you think there should be something more that we're doing in terms of our approach, maybe, in order to address these new risks that we were just discussing?
Yes, certainly. If you look at some of the things we are doing, I think we're actually moving in the right direction. You find a situation where, there are certain things that are routine. For example, filing STR. You can actually have a robotic process automation to handle that. So you may know, these are some of the things that some areas where technology can come in. You don't really need an human, get a staff, employee staff to start filing the STR. You can actually use RPA because, some of this filing STR, I don't know, because in my own country, we have a site where we can file our STR as financial institution. We have it's called a GoML website where we find what's it called, STRs. And on that platform, you can actually use robotic process automation to file those STRs. That's one area where technology can come in, and it will be very helpful, very, very helpful. And another area and technology can also be helpful, is the area of that's false positives, reduction of false positives. One of the concerns of compliance officers is the number of false positives. And if you have a situation where you have AI can be deployed, AI, we're talking about machine learning now, that can be deployed. Where things, a machine learning can actually learn some of the things that some of the things that are it can learn from experience, and then it knows that this particular customer, this is the type of transactions, this is his type of transactions. So that one will eliminate a lot of false positives. Instead of you getting alert and alert and alert on something that is false positive, realize that a machine, when you have what's called machine learning, it can actually help you to reduce the number of false alerts coming in. That's one of the things it can do. And not only that, another area that technology can also help is on customer onboarding. It can help greatly in customer onboarding. You know, I was talking about what pandemic has caused. You want a situation where you want to still continue to onboard customers. These customers are not ready to come to the branch. You, even as a financial institution, you don't want them to even come to the branch because of the risk. So what can you do? You must do you must deploy onboarding solution. And this onboarding solution must be able to determine, you must be able to determine who this customer is. First and foremost, your onboarding solution must be able to screen the customer and ensure that, okay, is this customer a PEP? You must be able to screen this customer on the watch list, and it's going to be done automatically. And if it's on the if it's on the global watch list, does it flag or does it send an email or whatever, or does it put the account creation on hold so that compliance can further review? That's what. What about the issue of visitation, KYC? These are some of the things that we now have a solution where we have solutions where you can do eKYC. What about even the issue of verifying these customers, face identification? You understand? Face identification. These are some of the things that technology can do, and I think that we can still do more. Technology can still do more to help us in compliance. But these are areas where, what do you call it? Technology is coming in, and I think that it's been of great help to financial institutions because it has enabled us to solve a lot of problems. Now, I can onboard a customer. I can actually verify whether this customer is who he claims he is using technology. Some of the document that the customer has supplied, I can, through the assistance of technology, verify those documents. So these are some of the things that technology is helping us to do in the area of compliance. And I know that naturally it will still continue. It will still continue.
Yeah, I think it sounds to me that what you're saying is, in terms of the actual methodologies that we apply for not risk assessment, customer identification, and other things we need to do, such suspicious transaction reporting, the actual framework itself is still very relevant today as it was yesterday, but it's about adopting systems, technologies to help us execute them much better and more efficiently. And I think those systems are the things that are going to, like you're saying, help us to keep up with the different changes that are taking place in the world so fast, which has always been the problem, right? That even if you staff compliance or, the AML team with 1,000 people, you can never keep up with the pace and speed of some of these things. So you're going to have to apply technological solutions if you have any hope of kind of keeping up with it. But there was a report I read, and the name is escaping my mind at the moment, but there's a report I read where, FATF was saying, there's the advantages of technological innovation and applying that are great, and it's something that people should be pursuing to support the efforts. But then we also have to understand the very real challenges that come with things like, and I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that it's not so easy to transition. There's transition risk in and of itself that gets introduced when you're implementing these systems, and what falls through the cracks when you're implementing. There's the fact that there's legacy systems that also have to be, considered. Do they work well with what you're implementing? Can they actually be put into place so that they work together, or is it so outdated? And what do we do with this thing? Yet it houses so much history and information and data. So, the challenge, it's all well and good for us to say, let's plug and play this wonderful thing that's been created. But we also have to be very cognizant of the fact that actually, there's 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 a it's going to be a journey. It's going to be a journey of implementing, and there's still going to very much be, human intervention required as we kind
Very
of figure out how
important.
to get it right as well. Yeah, for sure. And in terms of the skills, like, we've been talking about technology and stuff like that, but now let's talk about the people themselves that executing. What sort of skill set would you say that people who are doing this work, and obviously also who want to remain relevant, because like we said, 10 years ago transaction monitoring was people, tomorrow it might be a machine. What sort of skill set do you feel like financial crime compliance officers need to have to do the work, as well as to remain relevant in the technological era that we're finding ourselves moving into?
Okay, for a financial crime person to be relevant and to continue to be relevant, because those are some of the things we should look at. Being relevant and continue to be relevant
Yeah.
into the future. First and foremost, you must focus on your core skills first, your core technical skills. Nowadays, you must your regulatory compliance skills, very, very important, because now you must find a way, you must interface with regulators.
Yeah.
One of the issues that we're having is that with the pandemic, you still find that it's a situation where regulations keep on changing just to keep pace with the environment. So you as a compliance person, your regulatory compliance skills must be top notch.
Yeah.
Another area that we're supposed to be focusing on is your technology skills. You cannot work as a financial crime person now without being versed in technology. I've talked about customer onboarding solution. So if
Yeah.
you don't understand facial technology, I've talked about machine learning. I've talked about robotics. These are things that I've talked about artificial intelligence. These are things you should be well versed in now as a compliance person, because now gradually they are coming into mainstream. There's no solution that you are going to acquire now, AML solution, that won't have a little bit of artificial intelligence in it. Because the fact is that you can't do all those transaction monitoring, review all those transactions yourself.
Yeah.
Because now, because of the speed of transaction, look at the number of unlike before, when people have to come into the branch to carry out transaction. Now, transaction is at the speed of light. They can be in their bedroom, take what do you call it, consummating transaction. They can be anywhere. They can be on the go, or even on the street, anywhere. Your customer that you see that you think that is in Nigeria probably is in London. If the one you think that is in South Africa is actually living in Cameroon. Because, you understand, because of the mobility, because of the era of globalization, people tend to move around. You understand? So
Yeah.
that's all the
And now
issues.
people can work from anywhere, right? So
Anywhere.
when you onboarded him, he might have legitimately be located where he said he was located,
Correct.
but decided that, you know what, actually, I'm now going to work from Jamaica for the next year. And you need to be able to see that actually he's not some crazy, it's not always a bad thing. It could actually just be that. And you need to be able to identify that actually it's not a
Certainly.
case of false identity. It's a case
Certainly.
where someone has decided they want to be working from the beach in Jamaica. So those value judgments as well.
So like I said, so your technology skills, IT skills is very key. And
Yeah.
then we've been talking about another area is big data, analytics.
Yeah.
When you talk about KRI, that's key risk indicators, you need data.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of things you can mine from your data, the transactions of your customer, the records, your data the customers have given. There are a lot of information there that you can mine as a financial crime person. There are a lot of things there. And you need data analytics skills to be able to do that. And beyond that, you also need cyber security skills, some cyber security skills. You can't be a novice in that area. Cyber security is also one area you should focus on. And then you talk about data privacy. Data privacy is also becoming big. Those are some of the things you should focus on as a compliance person. You can't just, and then your sanctions. Look at sanctions now. It's like one a penny.
Yeah.
Almost every by the time you wake up, you'll have seen sanctions, sanctions. And so you, as a compliance or financial crime person, you must ensure that you're also versatile when it comes to, you must know sanctions compliance skills. So what have I've mentioned your regulatory compliance skills. I've mentioned your information technology skills. I've mentioned um, I mentioned the issue of you having data analytics. Three. There's another there's another one I've mentioned. Okay, I've mentioned
Sanctions compliance.
sanction compliance, and I also talked about your data privacy. Those are some of the 5 skills that you must have as as a financial crime person. Beyond that, your soft skills too are very important. Your soft skills. You can't do without your soft skills. You know now, you know as a compliance person or financial crime person, you need to engage. You know, one of the things you do is that on a daily basis, you must engage other stakeholders. You can't just sit and expect everything to fall in line for you. If you are, it's not going to work. If you are going to be adding controls, maybe suggesting that some controls should be added to some things, you have to seek buy-in of other stakeholders. You can't just wake up and slam controls
Yeah.
without getting the buy-in of other stakeholders. Other stakeholders must agree. So you, as a compliance person, your soft skills, that's your leadership skills, your communication skills must be top-notch. You know, I know I've discussed with you that I'm a member of Toastmasters. You understand?
Yes.
And then speaking, your public speaking skills must be top-notch. You must keep on learning as a compliance person because the environment is changing. And if you don't change, you'll be changed. That's a fact. So you have to keep on learning, acquiring all these skills, your 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 training skills. Because even as a compliance person, you know one of the things you do is also to train. You train your colleagues. You understand? You train your colleagues. If it is AML, your ABC, you train them. You have to train them because you can't just you can't assume because even one of the things that is in your policy is that you know that at least once annually you must organize training on AML and compliance training for your colleagues. That's I'm talking about the first level staff. You must organize training for them. So you must improve your training skills. There are several other things you need to do. Your communication skills, your training skills, your negotiation skills, because some of these things you have to negotiate. Negotiate. You don't just and your presenting skills. Because you know, as a compliance person, from time to time, you need to present your reports to the management, as your executive management, and to the board. And you must convince them. You must come up with facts. Come up with facts. And you know, somebody said that data don't lie. When you have, you can rely on data. You know, data analytics. When you provide them with data, they can management and your board will make decisions, better decisions. So you can see
Absolutely.
that all the things I've mentioned, they work together. Whether it is data analytics, because as a compliance, you must show them data. You can't just be telling them stories. They want to see data. They want to see that the number of PEPs that we have onboarded has increased by 10%. And this is an area of risk for us. And you must be able to show categorically your branches where that is generating those numbers. You must be able to tell them the number of alerts that you are getting now, the increase, and what is causing the increase. And it's only data analytics that can give you this information through data analytics. You should be able to you should be able to, even as a leader, you should be able to know your staff that's been overworked, maybe as a result of the number of alerts the person is getting. It's only data that can reveal all this information to you. You can't just sit down on your desk and assume. You can't just assume. You know, so
Yeah.
those are the things.
You're like, I think it looks like maybe it's coming from here. I'm like, no, 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 no. You need facts. I always say to like people, my mentees, and just generally people I engage with, that you can't present a number without, and you have to be able to tell me what it means, how you got there, what is the trend analysis, what is the root cause. There must be a
Very
story. You
important.
can't just say there were, in a report, it says there were 10 alerts. Full stop, you're done, you're finished. You're like, no, that's not
What
how.
does that mean? What does that
What does
mean?
that mean? Every number has to have a story that is sitting under it. So, like to your point, data analytics, it's very important.
Very
But I
key.
feel like sometimes some people get really intimidated. Like, I mean, we've mentioned a lot of skills, right? Data analytics, you have to understand machine learning and how that works. You have to understand sections and, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to become, Yemi, who I am aspiring to be in 5 years kind of situation. So what sort of like advice would you then say that, okay, how do you tackle getting to that level of competence and expertise, and how much depth do you actually need? Should someone now run off and do YouTube a few videos on machine learning, or should they be doing a deep dive course on robotics, process automation? Like, how much depth should they be pursuing to feel like they're at least competent enough to get these skills? Or, high level, medium level, deep dive. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah. For me, what they need to do basically is that they don't need to become expert in all this field, but you must get enough knowledge, at least to understand what's happening. At least you should be able to understand how does robotics process automation, how does it apply to my job? In what area can it help my job as a financial crime professional? You understand? These are some of the things you should know. You should be able to, at least those basic knowledge, you must have it. You don't need to go deep into everything. And if you want to, you can always do that, but you don't need to go so much deep, but have basic understanding of all this. When you talk about data privacy, you shouldn't be a novice in that area. Have a working knowledge of what it's all about. Have a working
Absolutely.
knowledge. When you talk about machine learning, have a working knowledge of what it's all about. There are webinars that are, some of them free online, that you could join, you understand, and you learn about some of these things. You don't even need to pay, and if you want, you can actually come to KC.
Come to KC Compliance. Thank you.
KC Compliance, you understand, where you could learn. If you want to dive deep into some of them, you can come to KC Compliance. But I would suggest that take them one at a time. For example, you can say this year I want to just focus on learning about sanctions and machine learning. Just two things. You can take one or two, maybe one course in sanctions and one course in machine learning. And those introductory courses, it will help you a lot. And you will now begin to see areas where machine learning can help your job. You understand? So when the experts are talking, you are not a novice. Because the experts, most times they don't even know what areas that you need this. Is it that will tell you that, come, see, this particular aspect of my job, I think that if we deploy RP, robotic process automation there, it will be helpful. These are things that I think that we do repetitively in this area, and I think that we could use this particular technology. That's one of the things that I have a basic knowledge, understanding of all this we have mentioned. I have a basic understanding of it.
Yeah.
That will really be of help.
And then when you get your data analytics and you want to ask your business to invest, you've now got in robotic, because it's not free. You're going to be asking your board to purchase $1 million system, for example. At least now you've got the data that also helps you support your argument as to why it's helpful. And even if you think about it in the other way, for me, I think about in terms of also being able to effectively support your business when they're introducing these digitizations, whether it's for products, for customers, and not necessarily in our own compliance space. You're in a position to then also be able to advise them accordingly on the risks that are being introduced by the technologies that they're implementing. Sometimes a lot of these things are going to be issued by third-party service providers, for example. What is the risk that is being introduced? I read an article the other day where they were talking about cloud computing and how, everyone is moving their data to cloud computing. But in essence, I think there are like 3 or maybe 4 globally, like really big providers of these services.
Of cloud
So there's a
services.
concentration risk that's been introduced as a result of the fact that there are only these few providers. And that's a new risk that's being introduced. So it's about, having an awareness around these types of things, that if we're now transitioning to cloud computing and we only have 3 service providers in the world, there's a concentration risk there. How are we mitigating for it? What is our, business continuity if all of them explode?
Those are the issues.
Extreme example. But those are the type of things you need to be able to think about. But you can only do that if you're looking into these different things and keeping your ear to the ground as to what is happening in these different spaces, and then you can advise your business accordingly. So a lot of gems there, and I hope, so many skills that you've mentioned. And I also like the fact that you mentioned the fact that you do Toastmasters. I wasn't sure if I was going to bring it up, but since you brought it up, I'm going to touch on it a little bit. Because I remember one edition of my newsletter that I issued, I shared a link to Toastmasters with the subscribers to the newsletter and was highly recommending it as a way to increase your speaking and presentation skills and such. So the fact that I have someone who's heavily involved in that space, and you've touched on how important it is, I just want you to, take a couple of minutes if you can to just explain how, your involvement in that space has contributed to your effectiveness in your career space as well.
Okay. For me, I joined Toastmasters just about a year ago, and one of the things it has done for me is that it has helped me a lot in my career. And one of the things is that it has helped me to be more visible. Because when you join Toastmasters, there are a few things that you learn. It's a very friendly environment. Nobody's going to criticize you. They will encourage you. It's an encouraging environment where you could learn, where you could make your mistakes. Before I joined Toastmasters, I remember that when I train my colleagues, I don't wow them. But now, when I train them, they appreciate it. You understand? I even enjoy myself training them, because now I know I have some of the skills that I need to be able to pass across what I'm telling them. Most people, when they come to compliance classes, they believe it's very boring. And compliance is not boring. It's the presenters that are making it boring.
It's the presenter who's boring.
They've not learned the skills. For me, I know how to engage my audience now. I know that when I come in, a lot of one thing is that a lot of presenters, they mute their video. How do I connect with you when your video is off? And a lot of professionals don't know that. They just mute their video. How do I connect with you? You're supposed to be engaging your audience every 15 minutes. You understand? You have to engage them. Maybe ask them to chat, ask them to ask a question. These are some of the things that have been taught in Toastmasters. You understand? And then there are a lot of other skills you can learn. Even as a Toastmaster, you have to learn up to 300 skills. Is it negotiation skills? Is it leadership skills? I serve as a leader in Toastmasters in vice president membership. So you learn to work with your team. What other things? Negotiation. I mentioned negotiation skills. I mentioned presentation skills. How you could present. A lot of professionals, just when they present, their presentation is too busy. They put so much text there instead of graphics. These are some of the things, little things that you learn when you join Toastmasters. And not only that, even how to evaluate. Evaluations, we are big when it comes to Toastmasters is very big on evaluation. How do you even evaluate as a leader? How do you evaluate your team members? How do you even evaluate yourself? These are some of the things that you learn. So for me at professional, every professional should be part of that club because you stand to gain so much joining that club, both in presentation. I can even tell you that my being here today is a result of Toastmasters. Because I've learned a few things on how I could position myself, you
Yes.
understand, in my industry. I've learned, and it's true that Toastmasters, I was telling some of my colleagues that if I had known what I know now in just the last 1 year that
Yeah.
probably I'll be working maybe in North America. Probably.
Everything happens when it's supposed to happen. Now you can launch.
So I want to encourage financial crime professionals.
Yeah.
Find a way. Join Toastmasters. You understand? You will learn how to present. You will learn how to speak extemporaneously. You will learn how to convince leadership, either your board, your exco, how to
Absolutely.
convince them, how to convince your colleagues, how to present your training effectively, and so on and so forth. So I want to have you.
No, it's amazing. And I remember I mentioned to you when we first started talking that I did Toastmasters as well, even though I was in high school at the time. I didn't then carry on with it. But I think it was an invaluable experience in terms of just giving you that knowledge of how to speak, present yourself, communicate, influence, negotiate, like you're saying. So it was actually a valuable experience. And I always highly recommend it to people who are saying, I feel shy about presenting, or when training comes, to your point, sometimes training, you can actually see, people are falling asleep, or they're just
Thank
wishing
you.
they were somewhere
Thank
else.
you.
And you're like, no. Training is not supposed to be like that. To your
At
point,
all.
engage people, talk to them. The point is not about ticking a box that training was delivered. The point is the transference of knowledge. They should
Are you
leave
adding
feeling
value?
like you're adding value. They should leave feeling
Value.
like, you know what, I learned something I didn't learn that I can apply in my role tomorrow.
Certainly,
And
certainly.
but a lot of people sometimes approach it like, okay, tick, I delivered AML training, even though they left as the same as they were when they walked into the room. So, I love that, I'm one of these days I must sneak into, in this virtual world, even though you're in Nigeria, I must be able to sneak into your training and also
No
just
problem. No problem.
watch
I'll be looking forward
watch
to
you
that.
work. I see here, Karamo saying Yemi's passion is undeniable. Let me put
Thank you
that
very
in.
much. Thank you.
He's saying that, and it's very true. It's quite evident that you are passionate about the subject matter, passionate about the work that you do, about the skills that are required to do, and it's come across so well in our conversation today. And I hope
Thank
that
you.
those who watch it either live or after the fact, really not only get an appreciation for what is required to be operating as a compliance a compliance professional in this specialized area of specialization, but also that it's much more than just, getting a qualification and getting a
No.
job. There is so much more that goes into it. So I'd just like to thank you for shining a light and making it quite clear everything that goes into, doing what you do, being head of compliance risk, correspondent due diligence, and
Thank
reporting
you.
for a commercial bank. It's
Thank
not
you.
child's play.
Thank you very
There's
much.
a lot that goes into it. So much appreciated. And with the last couple of minutes that we have in the session, I just wanted to know, is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience in terms of words of wisdom, advice, core skills, whatever, anything that has been left unsaid that you would like to share in our last part of this conversation?
Okay. Thank you very much, Kudzai. I just want to encourage my colleagues here, other professionals, that working as a financial crime professional is actually a calling, because you know that you are protecting customers, you are protecting your bank, your financial institution, you're protecting your country. It's a calling. So see it as a calling. And beyond that, you realize that for me, I see myself as adding value to people. During the course of my work, I've been able to do a few things, and I see that I could add value through financial crime compliance. And I also believe that you too can also add value to others, add value to your country, add value to people around you through financial crime compliance. So I want to encourage you ensure you add value to people, because it's something you must do on a daily basis. Look at your financial institution or where you work. Look at what other things can be done better. You know, for us as professionals, we are solution providers. We must provide a solution. Don't just be the person that will be stalling everything. Think about what you could do. What the those in the first line could do to improve. When you see something that is going wrong, sit them down. Try and teach them. You understand? Because somebody said that if you don't train them, you understand, you are going to pay. All of us will pay for it in the long run. And compliance, somebody said that if you think compliance is cheap, if compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. So as much as possible, I want to encourage us, let us add value to our organization, to our country, and to every person we meet on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you. What more can I say after than that, other than to thank you one more time for your time? I know you're super busy and have so much going on, but you took the time and made this a priority to be a part of compliance conversations, and I don't take that for granted. And those who are going to watch this and benefit from the knowledge that you shared today are going to, like you said, are going to have value added to them. So I just wanted to appreciate you and thank you for that. To everybody who joined the live conversation, whether it was for 5 minutes or for the full stream, I know it's a working day. Thank you so much for being a
Thank
part of
you.
compliance conversations today. Much appreciated. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend who you think could benefit from everything that we share. And I look forward to having more great guests like Yemi for you going
Thank
forward
you.
throughout the year. Support KC Compliance as you guys always have, and I appreciate that so much. But for today, we're going to call it a day. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining. So
Thanks,
goodbye.
Kudzai. Bye.
Bye.